recreational marijuana poisonings now reaching children as young as 5, and the fact that 3/4 of kids in treatment in Colorado today report that their marijuana came from a medical marijuana dispensary. Now, this is all consistent with a recent National Bureau of Economic Research paper conducted by RAND researchers that found that 2 distinct features in marijuana policy increases use. Those 2 features are home cultivation and legal dispensaries. Now, these are found, obviously, in states that have legalized, some states that have legalized this under medicine. Now, this should matter because despite popular myth, scientists from the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and we could go on and on, are universal in stating that marijuana is harmful for young people. Marijuana use, especially among young people, is significantly associated with a reduction in IQ, mental illness, poor learning outcomes, lung damage, and addiction. According to NIH, 1 out of every 6 kids who tries marijuana will become addicted. And last year, 400,000 emergency room admissions were applicable for marijuana. Now, in Colorado, though traffic fatalities have fallen over the last 6 years, marijuana-related fatalities on the roads have increased. Now, we already have evidence showing that in some cases, quote-unquote, medical marijuana is going to criminal enterprises and foreign drug trafficking groups. We know, as Senator Grassley mentioned, about the diversion to other state interdictions. And we also know, as mentioned, that 2 very damning state audits released in the last month shows that there has been no, quote-unquote, seed-to-sale vertical integration of marijuana policy in states that have allowed this for medical purposes. How on earth can we think that a task so much more infinitely difficult of full legalization is going to be handled any better? Now, right now, we are at a precipice in their assertion that they will mint more millionaires than Microsoft in their creation of the Starbucks of marijuana. This is what people in public health care about. The issue of a small amount used by an adult in the privacy of their own home is not what the initiatives in Colorado and Washington are about. So I would just conclude by saying when we can prevent the negative consequences of commercial sale and production of marijuana now, why would we open the floodgates, hope for the best, and try with our limited resources later to patch everything up when things go wrong? Thank you.
Back to Sheriff Urquhart, because you've heard what Dr. Zabet had said and others. And I'm interested in your insight. 35 years in law enforcement, a significant part of that is a narcotic detective. You obviously have, I mean, your sheriff's department is larger than all our law enforcement in Vermont put together. So those who criticize your state's initiative have asked whether legalizing small amounts of marijuana could have resulted in increased drug driving or illegal use by minors, cross-border trafficking. You've heard all those concerns. How do you address that from a public safety point of view?
I think what we need to do is continue doing what we've been doing all along, which is really robust enforcement. This is not going to change a whole lot. The rules that are in place or about to be in place in the state of Washington put a limit on the amount of marijuana that can be produced. And with the idea that they're only going to match demand. They're not going to produce enough so it can be exported to other states. Now, that's not to say illegal marijuana grows, like I'm sure is going on in Colorado, are not going to be exported. But we can go after those, and we will go after those. We don't expect what's grown legally under the new system to be exported. As far as driving, under this new law, we now have a way to go after people that are driving under the influence of marijuana. In the past, it was very, very difficult to get a conviction. Now we have a per se standard of 0.5 nanograms.
You're watching our live coverage of the Senate Judiciary hearings on 420radio.org.
Now we have a standard that we can use, just like we
Apologize for the buffering. We're having a lot of people hit this feed, and we will try to get you up to speed on this just as soon as we can. We have our live chat room with selected audience members commenting on the testimony. I'm also pasting in some of the comments from Twitter that we are receiving from many of the largest drug reform organizations.
I recall the frustration as a prosecutor when I was there because we did not have a standard we could use. Alcohol was easy. We had a very strict standard. So your commitment is to enforce the law as it is in your state. Are there areas where the federal government can help you?
Absolutely. And I think the clarifying letter that came out on August 29th helped immensely. It removed the uncertainty that we had. It knows that they're going to allow the citizens of the state of Washington what they want, and what they want is legalized marijuana, and that's a very big deal. I think it's going to take the criminal element as best we can out of the sale of marijuana, and that really was brought home to me just 2 nights ago when I was here in Washington D.C. My chief of staff here in the front row, Chris Behrens, and I went out to dinner. We went to old Ebbett's Grill, just 2 or 3 blocks from the White House. We're walking back to our hotel. It's about 9 o'clock at night, but it's dark. We saw 2 gentlemen, young gentlemen, college age, walked up to a man standing on the corner and says, "Hey, can I get some weed around here?" Now, they certainly didn't come up to us, but they did go up.
I take it you were not in your uniform.
I was not wearing this outfit, no. But they did go up to the most sketchy guy on the block, to try and buy weed. That is going to go away in Washington because they can go into a
Sorry for the delay here. We're having a buffering issue with the testimony of the Sheriff Urquhart from King County.
Not a Starbucks store. They can go into a freestanding store and buy their marijuana legally. So they know what they're going to get. They know what the price is going to be. They don't have to go to that criminal element on the street corner at 9 o'clock at night and solicit somebody to sell them marijuana. Our 502 is going to eliminate all of that. And that's a huge step forward.
My time is almost up, but I want to ask Mr. Finlaw sort of a similar type question because I understand the Governor Hickenlooper did not support the constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana in Colorado, but it's very clear from your testimony that you intend to follow the law and make sure it works. I understand that the lack of access to financial services, the inability to deduct business expenses, for example, from federal taxes, are cited as a hurdle for successful regulation of marijuana business. Am I correct in that?
Yes, Chairman Lay, you are correct. Thank you for raising that issue. You can understand that these businesses that are cash only, that have dozens of employees, payroll to make, they're dealing with cash, not with credit cards. They're having to find loans from disreputable financial institutions. It's a great challenge. It's a criminal challenge as well as a regulatory challenge. It's criminal, of course, because any business that has that much cash on hand and is having to transport it is ripe for robbery. It's also a regulatory challenge because it will be so much easier to audit the books, make sure that the taxes are being paid, make sure that the rules that we put in place are being followed if the folks are doing business with a bank or a credit union or other financial institution.
Thank you. My time is up. I have further questions I can submit for the record. Senator Grassley.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Finlaw and one for Mr. Sabed. I'll start with you, Mr. Finlaw. There's been a sharp uptick in drug-related suspensions and expulsions in Colorado schools in recent years, and in the state's second-largest city, Colorado Springs, drug-related referrals for high school students testing positive for marijuana has increased every year between 2007 and 2012. With legalization for recreation use, the challenges to protect youth will increase, and yet I understand that under certain circumstances, the rules in Colorado will allow for marijuana advertising on television and radio. The rules will permit marijuana businesses to maintain websites that could be accessible by children, and the rules will permit marijuana themed magazines to be sold in stores within the reach of children. My question is, if I'm right on those things I just cited, won't all these rules all effectively allow marijuana advertising to children? And then why do you believe that Colorado can successfully protect children from marijuana?
Senator Grassley, you raised some really important issues that we have been grappling with. Even the constitutional amendment authorizing marijuana specifically says that advertising directed at children can be prohibited. The enabling legislation and the new rules also do the same. So we've tried to develop rules that are narrowly focused on making sure that whether it's print or television, radio, web advertising, that it will not be targeted at young people. Cartoon characters and other advertising that would be particularly appealing to young people are prohibited. The final.
We're watching the live coverage of the Senate hearings on the state marijuana legalization conflicts with federal laws. Having a buffering issue. They've got a lot of people that are hitting this feed all at once, so we'll see if we can catch up with that. Get a refresh going here. We have many of our audience involved in the chat room as well. So we have
First Amendment issues to grapple with as we try to restrict advertising. The good news is that the voters of Colorado are going to have an opportunity to approve a new tax in November that will give us the resources to develop sort of best practices for education and prevention efforts. So what we intend to do is counter any ads with very, very strong and effective programming that will be public service programming that will be geared towards young people to let them know that, because we agree with you, we believe that for adolescents, marijuana is a danger, and we intend to educate them.
Also, Mr. Finlaw, you had an interview with NPR February. Quote, we have very strict controls over who can have access to medical marijuana, end of quote. There was an audit by your state in June concluded by the Colorado Department of Public Health, quote, but an audit by your state in June concluded that the Colorado Department of Public Health, quote, does not sufficiently oversee physicians who make medical marijuana recommendations, end of quote. The audit noted that one physician had recommended marijuana for over 8,400 patients. Would you still stand by your statement that Colorado has strict control over who can have access to marijuana? And if so, why do you stand by it? And why, with these damaging audit findings, should the Department of Justice have confidence that Colorado can implement robust regulation of recreational marijuana?
Thank you. You're right. As a matter of fact, in our conversation with General Holder just a few weeks ago, he raised the same question to us. He asked us about those audits, and he told us we needed to address the issues that are raised in those audits, and we are committed to doing that. The particular audit you talked about is the regulation over doctors who issue prescriptions. What I meant when I was quoted in February is that we've got really good medical marijuana rules and regulations. What we haven't done a good job of is enforcing those because we've lacked the resources. With the new tax coming, with the advent of legalized marijuana, we'll have the resources to hire staff to enhance our oversight of doctors, of those other businesses that are involved in the marijuana world.
My time's up. I'll submit one question to you and one to Mr. Sabat for answer in writing. Thank you.
Sheriff Urquhart, let me ask you, are you familiar with the 8 federal interest areas?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with those?
Yes.
From a law enforcement perspective, you think that they're adequate and appropriate?
Absolutely. And we will have no problem meeting those at all. Now, some of them don't apply necessarily straight to the sheriff's office, but many of them do. But from what I've seen from the regulatory standpoint that the state is enacting, I think it's going to work out very well. I have no problem with those whatsoever, and I thank the Justice Department for coming forward with those when they did.
And presumably given all your years in law enforcement and your years as a narcotics investigator, you have worked with the federal government on federal investigations in the past in various capacities, correct?
That's correct. And my detectives are doing that currently, yes.
And are there current activities?
Yes.
We are buffering the feed from the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings on the conflict between state and federal marijuana laws. Waiting for the refresh to take place here. Should be catching up.
Yes.
From a law enforcement perspective, you think that they're adequate and appropriate?
Absolutely. And we will have no problem meeting those at all. Now, some of them don't apply necessarily straight to the sheriff's office.
8 areas of federal interest. You don't see that reducing the federal law enforcement footprint in the state of Washington in any significant respect?
Absolutely not.
Very good. From a public health safety point of view, Mr. Finlaw, how do you feel about the 8 areas of federal interest? Are they adequate from your perspective?
We also embrace those. The task force that we put together to implement our new law developed guiding principles, and they were amazingly parallel with the Justice Department's guidance to us. And while this was a formalization of guidance, we really appreciate the fact that throughout this process, the Justice Department, particularly through our U.S. Attorney's Office, has been very forthcoming about their general concerns about this new law, and it really allowed us to focus as we developed our legislative and regulatory response.
And as you're the governor's legal counsel.
Yes.
It's a great job. I used to have that job. You have the responsibility of representing the governor in the legal negotiations about the enforcement program, the regulatory program. Say a word, if you will, about the comments that Senator Blumenthal and I concluded Deputy Attorney General Cole's testimony with about the importance of the department providing metrics that are as clear as possible so that people know what the rules are that they'll be engaging in.
Well, let me affirm what both you and Senator Blumenthal said. We, and I believe that the industry itself in Colorado would really appreciate that sort of guidance. Our Department of Public Safety, our State Patrol, our Bureau of Investigation in Colorado, along with local law enforcement, all will appreciate definitive guidance. And I think it will, when the day comes, if there is evidence of an operation that's appealing to young people or exporting marijuana grown in Colorado to other states, an enforcement action that shuts that down would be welcomed by us.
My time has nearly expired, but Dr. Sabet, I assume that your policy disagreement with the choice to decriminalize or make medical marijuana available sort of would drive your answer to all those questions. You're opposed to the metrics, you're opposed to the 8 areas of interest. You think that we should just continue along the previous path?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think the 8 provisions are as agreeable as baseball and apple pie. I don't know anybody who would say that those provisions are not helpful. The issue is how, and which I think you bring up, which is very helpful, how are we going to be monitoring and what?
Again, buffering issues here, waiting for the Kevin Sabet testimony to begin answering this question. Sorry for the buffering. We'll see if we can refresh that, get it going.
Your policy disagreement with the choice to decriminalize or make medical marijuana available sort of would drive your answer to all those questions. You're opposed to the metrics, you're opposed to the 8 areas of interest. You think that we should just continue along the previous path?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think the 8 provisions are as agreeable as baseball and apple pie. I don't know anybody who would say that those provisions are not helpful. The issue is how, and which I think you bring up, which is very helpful, how are we going to be monitoring? And what talking about actually doing the enforcement on the local level, I just haven't seen the evidence so far that we're going to try and rein in these big industries that are going to advertise on the internet legally. I don't know any kid who watches TV anymore. It's all on social media. Advertisements in these 2 states will be legal on the internet for kids. These are the kinds of things that worry, the Academy of Pediatrics and others and myself. And so we will be monitoring this with a very watchful eye.
Got it. Well, we look forward to working with you on that, and I want to extend through you my personal best wishes to Congressman Kennedy, who was a colleague in my delegation for many years and who I respect very greatly.
Told me the same. Thank you.
I would say the same if you could pass along my best wishes. And as I understand your position, it is not so much against legalization, but the evils and abuses that may be the result. And I wonder if you could say, I know you allude to it in your testimony, whether in fact those evils or abuses have in fact occurred in Colorado and Washington, and what would be your advice to Connecticut?
Sure. Well, I mean, I've definitely seen them already occurring in these states, and I don't, I understand state officials are in very difficult positions here trying to implement these laws that have been passed by a majority of their voters. But the effects of what we've seen, for example, in a state like Colorado, where less than 2% of people with cards that authorize them to use marijuana medically have cancer, HIV, or any other serious chronic illness, and that we've seen them being handed out like candy, that we have seen the mass advertising already, that worries me. What we see with the public use of marijuana in places like Washington, especially in places like Seattle, that worries me. So again, I don't see the evidence of, although it's a difficult task, of trying to implement something robust and trying to enforce that, especially in the face of an industry that will be pushing back against every single kind of provision, like putting magazines that advertise marijuana just behind the counter. And I know the government tried to do that and then dropped that lawsuit when it was challenged. Or things like in Washington State, how although packaging will be sterile, you can still have gummy candy shaped, attractive to kids marijuana products. You can still have marijuana products that are edibles, that are actually sometimes the thing that is sending more people to ERs than even joints, in terms of an inexperienced marijuana user eating a marijuana brownie that has very concentrated forms of THC in that brownie all at once. That can be a very traumatic experience for some people. So I don't see any of that being regulated, and that's what I worry about. In terms of the position that Sam and others and myself have put forward, again, I think we are positing that in a country with a First Amendment, in a country that has seen the alcohol and tobacco industries relentlessly target kids, and by the way, target addicts, because these industries do not make money off of casual users. Okay, the marijuana industry does not make money off of the person who decides once every 10 years to light up a joint. The industries, alcohol and tobacco are included, make money off of addiction. They make money off of the small amount of users that consume the vast amount of the volume. What I worry is that inevitably in this country, American-style legalization is commercialization, is promotion, no matter the best interests that state officials and regulators and liquor control boards and others try and implement. So that is the worry. It's not about imprisoning people for small amounts. It's not about saddling people with criminal records who get caught with a small amount. It's about this mass commercialization.
I wonder if the two other witnesses reacting to the points that have just been made about the problems that have arisen under the Colorado and Washington law would respond.
I think that we do agree with the concerns that Dr. Sabat's raised with respect to the dangers of products that are designed for young people. And so we have put into place some significant restrictions on packaging and labeling. The gummy bear story, you're right, it's a problem. And our Department of Public Health, our regulators who are looking over the licensed premises will be making sure that those types of packages, that type of promotion for young people doesn't happen in Colorado. It's happened, admittedly, in the past, but we are going to redouble our efforts to make sure that young people don't have encouragement and don't take the fact that it's now legal for adults as a sign that it's good for kids.
I think there's some urban myths that are floating around out there. That Seattle is going to turn into the Starbucks of marijuana, for example. That 500 or 50,000 people were all smoking at Hemp Fest in downtown Seattle a couple of weeks ago. That there's going to be gummy bears infused with marijuana. That's just not going to happen in the state of Washington. The big business is not going to take over the marijuana business, the legal marijuana business in the state of Washington. There's no vertical integration allowed. The processors and the growers of marijuana cannot own retail stores. Only 3 retail stores can be owned by one owner, for example. No advertising, security, surveillance systems, lots and lots of protections in place to make sure marijuana is not sold, marketed to people under the age of 21 or used by people under the age of 21 in any way, shape, or form. We realize what's going on. We are going to avoid that when it comes to legalized marijuana for recreational purposes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired. Thank you to all of you for being here today.
Well, that brings this hearing to its conclusion. Let me thank Deputy Attorney General Cole and our 3 witnesses on the second panel for their contributions to our understanding and work on this issue. For those who wish to add anything to the record of this hearing, the record will be maintained open for 1 additional week. But other than that, we are adjourned.
And that's the conclusion of the Senate Judiciary hearings on the conflict between state and federal marijuana laws. We've got our panel assembled, been watching these hearings for quite a bit, and Danny Danko is joining us from High Times Magazine. He's out in New York. Danny, what's your response to some of these facts that we heard in this hearing? Danny, do we have you? Not getting a mic from Danny. Let's see if we can go to Lively Libra in Iowa. Oh, there we go. I got to turn my mic on. Lively Libra in Iowa, your reaction to your Senator Grassley or anything else from the hearings?
Okay, I was listening to you in the other window. I'm here.
Thank you.
Oh.
Just wondering what your reaction was to some of the hearing there. Senator Grassley's question. Of course, he's your senator, so that's of interest to me as well.
Right. You know, Grassley politicized it right up front, and cancer doesn't care if you are Republican or Democrat. We are ignoring doctors. We're putting all of the faith in law enforcement, and heavens above. What the hell? Until that sheriff talked, I thought we were sunk.
Yeah, that was amazing responses, and I think the sheriff is the one I've been following on Twitter and reading a lot of people's reactions to this, and a lot of people's reactions are very, very positive toward the sheriff, saying he made a lot of sense there, and we were very, very glad to see that. Let's see if we can get Danny Danko on the line. Danny, are you there? Are you able to hear us? Nope, still Danny. I think Danny's talking to someone else. Let's go to Rob Great Wolf, who's still in Denver, Colorado. Rob, your reaction to the hearing?
Oh, well, I really like that sheriff.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say that like word when it comes to cops these days, but I like that guy.
Yeah, he seemed pretty down to earth, huh?
He could move to Denver anytime.
Yeah, I think we could all use a sheriff like Sheriff Urquhart. His testimony was very, very appealing to those of us. Of course, he mentioned, he kind of gave a shout out to Seattle Hemp Fest, which I really liked.
Now, Sabat, on the other hand, a bigger crock of lies I've never heard. He did make a couple points that hit hard. That hurt. I got to admit that. We probably do have some things to work out in Colorado, but I'm sorry. I like my gummies.
Yeah, it was something they kept bringing up is like, oh, there would be this, marketing to kids, and they'd be attractive little gummy shapes, and I think what that ignores is the fact that for a lot of us adults who consume marijuana, gummies are tasty. I like gummies. What's wrong with,
I don't have teeth.
Well, there you go for folks.
Gummies I can do. Hard candies I can do. I can suck on.
Yeah.
But they want to take all those away. You know? What happens when my lungs are messing up on me? I got COPD. I'm supposed to vape and eat medibles a lot.
Right.
Yeah, so do we deny adults anything in life because kids are exposed to it? And what is that saying about kids? I have taught teenagers in high school for 30 years, and they are so much smarter than we give them credit for. This makes me so mad. It's the same with sex ed. Oh, don't teach them about contraception because then they'll do it. Well, they're doing it anyway while we're talking about it, so we need to shut the fuck up and start giving them credit.
Yes, let's go to the South. Sharon Ravert, Georgia Moms for Marijuana, is on the line. Elucidate on what Libra was saying?
Oh, yeah, they need to come off of all this stuff. Listen, we have alcohol in our cabinets, and we're able to keep it away from kids. What does it matter whether it's a gummy bear or whether it's the plant or what it is? There are medical patients out there that cannot possibly smoke enough marijuana in a day to get the medicine they need. These other edibles are what they need to help them. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to cut off all the medical patients because the kids may get pot? They're getting pot right now, like Lieber said. Exactly. Give them some damn credit.
Exactly, and I appreciated. I think it was Finlaw, the Colorado, with the Colorado Governor's Office, speaking about how there would be counter advertising. There would be, public relations. There would be. I always make the point that at least with alcohol, we get the drink responsibly campaign and we get the information campaigns, and that's what I anticipate we will see with marijuana being legalized.
Right on. If we can get that far, at this point. That's just another one of those little sticking points, whether we're going to have advertisement and how it's going to be done and all. At this point, parents feel like their teenagers can make good decisions when we give them the truth. And we need to stop worrying about all the semantics and get this shit done.
Absolutely. Let's go to New York, where Danny Danko is standing by. I think he might be online with us. Can you hear us okay, Danny?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. I wanted to get your reaction to the hearings and what stood out for you guys there at High Times.
Okay, yeah. I'm here actually with Rick Cusick. We both watched it live, and it was interesting to see, our side have its say in the halls of the federal government. Amazing that Sheriff Urquhart, I think is how it's pronounced. Yes. Amazing what he was able to say, and I mean that's experience talking to people with obviously very little experience actually on the ground of the drug war. And so for him, with 30 years of experience and as a sheriff, and to talk about legalization as the ideal option, and a lot of the senators questioning the people, the Department of Justice guy about why aren't you going after more than just these 8 people who break one of these 8 guidelines, and I think that they really held their own by explaining that, the people in those states voted for this, and they kind of have to, they have to comply with the will of the people in those states, and they made pretty strict guidelines that people can continue to do business, by following, and I think that, that's pretty reasonable, and for them, even Sabet thought that was reasonable.
Yeah, that was a surprise for me to hear, and I liked hearing from Sheriff Urquhart when he actually said the words, "We respect the will of the people." And Rick, I see him standing over your shoulder, back from Seattle as well as you. Rick, anything you wanted to mention about the hearings?
Yeah, it was really good hearing Urquhart speak like that. I live in New Jersey, and in New Jersey we have a medical marijuana law, and they literally are trying everything they can do to make sure that it's not being implemented. And you can tell when your public officials are operating in bad faith, And it was really refreshing to see that they had somebody there, a public official, who was actually operating in good faith and saying, whatever the people are going to decide, that's what we're going to do.
All right, so I want to thank everyone who's a part of our panel. By the way, for folks just tuning in, this is our post-hearing coverage of our coverage of the hearing that was just on with the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Pat Leahy calling forth the Deputy Attorney General James Cole, the Sheriff of King County, Washington, the Chief Legal Counsel of Denver, or of the Office of the Governor from Denver, Colorado, and the Joker to my Batman, Kevin Sabet, the head of Project SAM. And it was quite interesting to hear some of his spinning of some of these things. And I just wondered if anybody wanted to take some time with some debunking. I'll start with one of them. He brought up the 1 in 6 kids who tries marijuana gets addicted. And by my math, there ought to be millions more pot addicts out there by that kind of metric. What do you guys at High Times have to say? Because that's a very common talking point we hear from them.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed out loud when he said it. It wasn't funny. It was tragic funny. I mean, they define addiction so broadly, and it's certainly not the definition of addiction that is clinical under any circumstances. These guys are really politicians talking about something they don't quite understand. To him say, using the word addiction, I believe also at another point, didn't he say something about marijuana death syrup or something to that effect?
Emergency room admissions or something?
Right, yeah, I mean, just playing fast and loose with all of these numbers. It's amazing to me how this is a hearing, and of course in the 1937 when they did the hearings, there were these people coming in spouting very similar rhetoric, but they were the ones that were getting their way back in 37. It feels like it's just the opposite right now. Yeah. And that's on the laughable end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I going to more of the laughable things that he mentioned there at the end, he seems to Kevin Sabet seems to really hate the Constitution because he's got a problem with the First Amendment. Apparently, the First Amendment's a big issue, and I know you guys at High Times had to deal with a First Amendment issue where in Colorado they were trying to put you behind the shelves. Senator Grassley even obliquely referenced you, saying, pot magazines will be available where children could see them. What do you think?
And he said that they backed off when that was challenged. Well, we were the ones that challenged it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go to some of the folks on our panel. We got people from Iowa, Colorado, Arizona, Georgia, and Missouri joining us. Let me go out to Missouri first, where Trickster Phillips was watching the hearings out there. He's an activist out there in Missouri. Anything stand out for you that you'd like to comment on?
There was so much. I really enjoyed the fact that they had the law enforcement members who were speaking out for the initiatives that their citizens passed in such a positive way. Other than that, really, just kind of the same old from Sabet, and kind of the same BS you get from politicians on the opposite side. And otherwise, I guess I don't have that enlightened commentary to offer. So
yeah, that's fine.
It's just good to hear that this has gotten to the federal level in such a way. So it's definitely positive steps we're making.
We're definitely on the right path. And with regard to that advertising thing, oh my gosh, the marijuana businesses will advertise. I ask anybody, when was the last time you saw Joe Camel? When was the last time you saw the Winston Cup? They haven't been around since 1998 because of the tobacco lawsuit settlement. I just fail to understand why failures to prevent advertising in the past mean we have to continue to fail in the future. Let me go out to Arizona. We've got our friend Bago Shrago. He's our music editor on Thursdays and also an activist in the state of Arizona. What are your reactions to the hearing?
All in all, I think it was pretty positive. I mean, I like the fact that I think I didn't get to catch all of it, but I think Sabet only got to speak about twice, and I think that sheriff spoke 3 times the amount and much more volume than anything he had to say. So I think all in all, it wasn't that bad of a hearing, and It was just funny how Sabet talked, and they pretty much just pushed him to the side right after he spoke and moved right on to the sheriff, which was, I thought was hilarious.
And so you think to, like, you know, if your mom or, you know, your family members that maybe aren't into this were watching this hearing, that the sheriff maybe came off as the most relatable?
I would think so. I mean, he just gave a good image. He seemed trustworthy. You know, the fact that the congressman kept mentioning, I think it was Leahy saying, you know, he had 35 years of law enforcement experience, you know, and he very much valued that. He kept reiterating that, and I think that would go a long way to people who are watching at home. So, no, I think the whole thing was, all in all, not too bad. I was quite impressed, actually.
All right, we'll head out to Georgia now, get perspective from the South. We've got Sharon Ravert from Georgia Moms for Marijuana and Normal Women's Alliance and Peachtree Normal, and her business card needs to be twice as long to start covering all of this stuff. But, you know, you have a perspective of having had to deal with a nasty county sheriff. How much do you love Sheriff Urquhart from Seattle?
Well, I'd like him to come out here. I'll just get rid of our sheriff and take him right on. Yeah, we did get rid of that sheriff you're speaking of. That was part of the plan when they busted through my doors and took my kid out of bed with a gun to her head. That's when we started trying to replace the sheriff. And thank goodness we were successful in that. It took about a year and a half talking to over 600 people that were my clients at the time, and we got him kicked out of office. We've got one that's in there that's a little better, but I'd like to let everybody know I'm living in a district, District 9 in Georgia, that I just found out about, that is the second most conservative district in the entire nation.
Wow.
And we were able to get our sheriff out because of the SWAT raids that he was pulling on our children. And if we can do it, every county in this nation and every city can do it. So I just want to give hope out there to them. I want to say about the hearings, I'm so glad to see Sabet back in the closet and up on the shelf for a minute.
Very, very well put. And, you know, one of the things that Sabet mentions, and he always tries to minimize, and this happened a bit, is he tries to say, you know, oh, no, we're never about, you know, doing any locking up people that are using, they're just personal possession. And, you know, you were a victim of a raid, and I think it's always very offensive to hear that, you know, the current status quo is not negatively affecting the people who are mere consumers of cannabis, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, that just makes me sick, and it's one of those things that I have to always comment on, as you saw in the chat room. Talk to me, Mr. Sabet. I can tell you how it affects people. I can tell you what it's still doing to my family and how we are affected with PTSD. Let me say this. I wasn't smoking near as much marijuana before they came in my house. I smoke 10 times as much now to PTSD.
Yeah.
So it is working, and they're making more and more activists as they do it.
You know, we have another victim of this, you know, just personal possession. Lively Libra, our friend in Iowa, can testify a little bit, too, as to how the status quo affects people's families and careers and livelihoods.
Well, yeah, you know, just, oops, hello.
Hello.
It asked me if I was still here.
You're
okay.
Still here.
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, my son, his 20-year-old son, was picked up for smoking in a church parking lot. He was stupid, but he had 1.5 grams, and $3,000 later, time in jail with courts, lawyers. You know, he was lucky because, you know, he got off with a little slap, and it didn't affect his student loans. But he's a student in Boston. So he lives in, deep Crim state and now a medical state. And so he doesn't want to come back to Iowa now because they're arresting his friends. And so they exist. I don't know how Sabet can say they don't. You know, plus, you know, I'm not employable now because I tried to exercise my First Amendment rights as an activist and it blew up. You know, I could have fought it and drugged my whole family, my minor child, through the courts. Decided not to do it, and, you know, now I regret it a little bit because I'm sitting here in Iowa stuck, can't get a job. You know, there was nothing about my performance. It was all about that I was talking about legalization. So I don't know what world Sabet lives in.
Yeah, and of course, you're in the state that Senator Grassley, he's the ranking member that was on that committee, and, you know, I have a feeling that Sabet ended up there thanks to connections with, Sabet's friend Patrick Kennedy might have gotten a hold of Sheldon Whitehouse there, might have gotten a hold of Grassley, who knows. Let me go back to Danny Danko for a second here, because we just spoke to two women, two mothers whose lives were upended by simple possession and the raids that came from that. And I just, you working with High Times, I'm sure have heard 1,000 times more of those stories. And your reaction to Kevin Sabet's minimization of that and why we need to embrace this legalization.
Yeah, I mean, I speak to people every day that tell me that they've had their lives affected by the drug war. Some of them, lost loans. Some of them lost parents. Some of them lost children. Some of them lost their pets. But they have all lost something. And it's incredible to even hear that coming from him. It's like this kinder, gentler, prohibitionist kind of idea that he's got, but it just doesn't, it's not reality. It's not what's happening out there in the streets. I mean, drug agents and even sheriff's departments that aren't even trained for this purpose are knocking people's doors down based on informant, testimony. And, the typical pot family or pot, user with a family is not a threat, is not, going to, they could basically call these people on the phone and ask them to come outside the house, as far as most of these raids seem to go down. And instead, they turn it into this ultra-violent situation that the kids have to witness and be pulled away from. And it just, it baffles my mind that he thinks that doesn't happen. He's got to know that it happens and just ignore it. And that makes him an evil person. And, I'll debate him all day long and whatever, but I don't know how he sleeps at night being that shill for something. And someone in the chat room mentioned, Sabet is on the wrong side of history, and we're going to prove it. And that's the point. There were people who were against desegregation back then. There were people who were against marriage between a black and a white person, marriage between gay people. There were people all throughout history that were on the wrong side of it, and that's going to continue with our cause as well. But we know we're on the right side. We certainly have better parties than they do.
Yeah.
And if they're starting to now, the plus side is if they're starting to now be worried about, well, what's the advertising going to look like when we legalize pot, or what's how are we going to ensure that it gets to the right people? We've already won at that point. Now it's a process of just implementing it the way we want it to be, because we can't have a regulated industry full of need to pool our resources as a community and an industry. But yeah, I mean, it boggles my mind that he could say that, because you and I and all the people we know have heard these stories over and over again of huge losses that people have taken and small losses that people have taken. I myself have, at least 4 or 5 friends in prison right now, nonviolent drug offenders, marijuana-only offenders. So it offends me on a personal level and on a professional level that he could even say it or believe it, which I don't believe he believes.
Yeah, you quoted our Grey Wolf in the chat room, and I'm going to go to Grey Wolf here for a second because he brings something up in chat as well. Here he is in Colorado, a state that has legalized marijuana, and yet the effects of prohibition still are, wrecking a part of your life. Tell him what you mentioned there in the chat room about, going on to school.
I can't do the physical labor I used to do due to a disability, but they won't give me help. They won't help me go to school to learn a new trade because I have drug convictions. They said I can't have a student loan or a student grant.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing about Colorado's legalization that helps you out with that, right?
No, nothing.
Yeah, this is the collateral damage from marijuana prohibition at the federal level that cannot be erased simply by the states making these changes. But at least the states now seem to be given some guidance on moving forward with this. Currently, folks, you're listening to the live coverage of the post-reaction to the Senate Judiciary hearings. We're going to go on to the top of the hour, and then we'll have go back to our music hour, and then the Russ Belville show will commence at 3 o'clock Pacific time, we've got coverage of the legalization panel from the High Times Seattle Cannabis Cup for you on today's show. And let me go back out, and we'll just reiterate here one of the stats that I wanted to get to. This was this was a comment I saw from Twitter, and it has to do with the marketing of marijuana and the sales of marijuana, because one priority seems to be that we don't want any diversion out of state. And with that, there was a reaction from the Denver lawyer who said, well, we've got seed to sale tracking. We've got this vertical integration so we can keep track of where everything is. Another consideration is we want to make sure there's no big marijuana taken over by big business. And the sheriff from Seattle said, well, because we don't have vertical integration, it's going to be more mom and pop. It's going to be more distributed. So, Danny Danko, let me ask you from the business perspective on this. It looks as though we've got two different sets of paradigms here. One vertical integration in Colorado, one mom and pop in Washington. And what do you think that tells us as far as moving forward, and which, if either, do you think is going to be a better solution?
Well, I always say that the best solution for people is just to grow their own, or have friends that grow it for them and share it amongst themselves. We don't absolutely have to have retail sales of marijuana. It's, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And I've seen both models working in Colorado. It's tougher for a mom and pop type operation to get off the ground. It's just, they don't have the money. They don't have the wherewithal or the resources that are needed in order to qualify. But Washington is implementing pretty strict regulations as well on who can or can't open up a retail shop. So just while we were there for the Cup, they were announcing that how many per county they were going to allow. So there's restrictions there as well. I think if the laws, whether they be medical or recreational, if they allow you to grow 10 or 15 plants, I think that's really your best bet to do, because if it's legal, you really, you don't have the fear anymore that, those plants are going to have your children taken away from you, or your home invaded or taken by the bank or whatever. So, that's the ideal thing, I think, growing your own. But if you have to go to a shop, it'd be nice if it was people who were already a part of this world before all of this changed, and rather than, Microsoft millionaires that just want to come in and make a buck.
All right, and it's good. I think it's good that we got two different states doing completely different focuses as far as their regulation goes. Mom and pop in Washington. We've got the big seed to sale vertical integration in Colorado, and I think this makes it more interesting, at least from the federal perspective, as far as seeing what works and what doesn't, and what will fit with those federal priorities in the memo. We've got about 7 minutes left here, so I want to give a minute to each of our guests here who've been so gracious joining us here on this panel since early today. Let's go first to Trickster Phillips out in Missouri for your final statements, what you thought of the hearings, and anything you want to tell the audience.
Well, I think we're definitely making progress, and it's good to see, again, that it's gotten to this level as far as being taken seriously. I guess as far as what I'd like to say overall is just everybody keep up the good work, keep fighting the good fight, and, do what you do, because we're, again, on the right side of history, and we just need to persevere so we can see this thing through.
All right. Thank you so much, Trickster Phillips in Missouri. Sharon Ravert in Georgia, your reactions, final words. Oh, you're on mute, darling. Got to turn your mic on.
How about that?
There you go.
Okay, thanks. Prohibition's ending. We just got to keep up what we're doing. Keep talking to people that you would not normally talk to. They're listening. The facts are on our side, and just keep up the great work. And thank you again to Washington and Colorado, and thanks to people like High Times that keep us all informed. And we will see you guys in Boston for the Freedom Rally.
All right. See you there, Sharon. Going to Robert, a.k.a. Bago Schwago in Arizona. Your thoughts as we close out our coverage.
I just want to say I think all in all it was a good event, and I think it was definitely more on the positive than the negative, and thank you to everyone, all the freedom fighters. Thank you to Russ for putting this together, and Danny and everyone out there. And we are on the right side of history, and we will win eventually. So, yeah, that's about it.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Another Robert, Gray Wolf out there in Denver, Colorado. Your thoughts?
We've won. That's the way I see it. They're just haven't figured it out yet. No brainer there.
All right. Thanks for everything you're doing there in Colorado, and thanks for passing Amendment 64. We appreciate it. All right, and we go to Lively Libra in Iowa for her closing thoughts on the hearing, and anything else you want to mention?
Oh, first of all, I just apologize for the whole Grassley deal from Iowa. No, but I think I am hopeful that the tide is turning, and this is a social justice issue. It is a matter of personal choice and freedom, what we want to put in our body for any reason. And if we would just insert alcohol every time they said cannabis today, then by this logic, alcohol should definitely be prohibited immediately.
Yeah, we know how that turned out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Libra, for your perspective out there in the great Midwest in Iowa. And we'll wrap things up here with Danny Danko, High Times Magazine. And, of course, we had Sharon mention Boston Freedom Rally. Maybe we ought to do a plug on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be in Boston this weekend. First time that it's 2 days. And as far as the hearing, I would say I have two things that I took away from it. The good news is they're paying attention, and we're making huge amounts of progress, and they want to know what we're up to. And they've been ignoring us for so long. That's pretty interesting. The bad news is they're paying attention, and they want to see us regulate our own industry in ways that they don't want to have to come in and regulate for us. And I think that gives us a very unique opportunity to control our own destiny as a cannabis community. And I think that's my takeaway from it, is that, you know, they're not ignoring us anymore, but that means we need to step up and do things right.
That's right. It's time for us to step up our games. Thank you so much, everybody who's involved in this panel, everybody out there that have been watching and listening on 420 Radio. And just to let you know, we are here every day. We are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with live coverage of cannabis community events. We also have our flagship show, my show, the Russ Belville Show, at 3 p.m. Pacific, and repeats every 3 hours on this stream so that you can get the latest news, interviews, analysis, opinion, music, entertainment, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. My final thoughts on this event, of course, it's historic, and I've been just so blessed to work with so many great activists, and I've been reading their tweets and reactions to it. Stephen Gutwillig mentions that the Senate marijuana hearing largely accepts prohibition has failed and an era of robust state-level regulation is here. Completely agreed with that. I wanted to quickly mention on Kevin Sabet's testimony, he brought up really quickly his talking point about less than 2% of medical marijuana patients are getting it for cancer. This is black belt level obfuscation, because he always fails to let you know patients can register for more than one condition. This is where he tries to make you feel like everybody's registering for pain, when in fact, cancer, AIDS, HIV, epilepsy, Crohn's disease happen to cause also a lot of pain. Let's see who else we've got here. Some retweets that came through that I thought were very interesting. We had Senator Whitehouse was mentioning the what was going on as far as Connecticut goes. We had previous chats here. Let's see if I can bring these up. Well, we're just closing up anyway, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us here at the Russ Belville Show's live coverage of the 2013 historic hearings on marijuana legalization and the conflict between state and federal laws. Coming up next, we will have an hour of Electric Tuesday music for you. As I prepare our next show, the Russ Belville Show at 3 o'clock, we've got coverage of the High Times Legalization panel. Allison Holcomb, the woman who chaired the campaign to legalize marijuana in Washington, along with Rick Steves, the award-winning travel author, will be a part of that panel. We also, I think I'll look and see if Danny will nod. Was Vivian McPeak on that panel as well? I think he was for the legalization panel. And Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes. And I forget everyone else who was on it, but we will watch that next. It's coming up on the Russ Belville Show, coming up at the top of the next hour. So for everyone here at 420 Radio, I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks you for joining us, and stay tuned. In 1 hour, we will be back.